5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, good morning and welcome to the Land Care presentation on making your home more affordably by changing it to green. And if you're sitting well away from the aisle, if you would move over closer to the aisle, we are streaming this out over the air. So it's nice to let people who are watching on their computers at home see that there are people in attendance. Our next speaker is Fred Oesch. He's a designer and build firm, and he's produced helpful, energy-efficient alternative dwellings, custom interiors, furniture, and fine arts for more than 30 years. His specialties include solar design, green timber frame, straw bale construction, living earth roofs, and organic environmental control systems. Fred has a master's degree in architecture and pending architectural registration in Virginia. He has experience in teaching, management, and human and material resources, encompassing the full range of design disciplines, conducting research on environmental design, and lecturing at universities in the U.S. and Europe, and has practiced environmental design, construction technology, product design, and fine art. He has also developed internationally marketed furniture and architectural software. Fred's projects have been featured on home and garden television and in numerous newspaper and magazine publications. In 2007, Fred received the Virginia Sustainable Building Network Project category and the 2009 the Green Innovation Award for Best Green Designer. He is currently completing a new book titled Symbiotic Living, Elements, Timeless Design, and Building Solutions. Without further ado, Fred, welcome to you this morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry for that mouthful, but at any event, we'd just like to start off by thanking Lauren Webster for inviting me to this event, and also for Laura George for being so gracious as to give me accommodations while I was here. Thank you for that. The essence of what I'm going to try to talk about, we've only got a half an hour, so I'm going to try to talk fast and go through a lot of material for you. If you would please, because of that, just hold questions to the end. I'd be happy to answer any questions after that. And, you know, with the economy what it is today, I think affordability is key in everyone's mind. What can they, you know, so many people want to do something green and sustainable for all the various reasons, but, you know, how do you make it affordable, particularly with the economy that we're dealing with today? So hopefully I'll give you some ideas on how you might be able to approach that, whether you're thinking about new construction or retrofitting or additions or whatever it might be. The other thing I want to talk about, too, in conjunction with the general idea of affordability is kind of the subtitle of my book, which is Timeless Elements of Design and Building Solutions. Just to kind of start off the notion of it, you know, this is an agricultural community, so this might be kind of an acronym for you to remember. Think in terms of growing crops, CROPS. And the reason for that is because I think that there's so much talk these days about sustainability. And in my view, this notion of sustainability to some extent really puts the cart before the horse, in the sense that I think there's so many other things that we can do before we start thinking about sustaining the status quo of what we've accomplished. You know, the obvious things, conserve. However you can do that, whether it's with power or any resources, human resources, whatever they are. You know, to the extent to which we can conserve, then that's the extent to which we don't have to produce or generate other power. So, and certainly recycling, you know, it falls very much in line with that. Recycling building materials. I have some of my best projects are actually from recycled materials and using them in very innovative ways. So, you know, and optimizing all of our systems, fine-tuning what we do have that already exists, particularly with regard to our mechanical systems, HVAC systems. And then at that point, start thinking about producing alternative power and alternative means of generating power. And then lastly, you know, once we've kind of got to that point, then I think about sustaining. And again, because of time, I'm not going to go into a lot of fine detail here, but these, I think, are some of the principles of what I think is actually a better term for the whole notion of the green movement, the idea of regeneration, or using regenerative systems as compared to sustainable systems. Regenerative systems are systems that are not only stylistically organic, but actually factually organic in terms of living systems, systems that are self-maintaining, self-regenerating, self-renewing, and I'll be showing you a lot of examples of that as we go along here. And when we start thinking about the elements of timeless design and building solutions, I like to use the traditional Greek notion of the 5 elements of earth, air, fire, water, and spirit to kind of break down the various categories of how we might approach this. So when we think about the earth, you know, to a large extent, there are principles and techniques that have been available to us for millennia. And so much of the green movement is really not so much new ideas as it is rediscovering timeless ideas and ways of doing things that go back forever. You know, like for example here, these are sod buildings, fairly recently constructed actually in Newfoundland. And so, you know, not to say that that's the way we should be doing things today, but I mean, they surely did function very well for timeless generations. And then if you kind of take those timeless techniques and apply them to what a lot of folks are doing today in many different regions, you know, where you're using earth, which is essentially a free material for the taking, and you know, earth is actually one of the leading building materials on a worldwide basis that's being used everywhere. So there's so many variations of that. You know, there's adobe, there's what's called cob, wattle and daub. There's just, you know, this is an earthen bake oven. There's so many ways of just very simply by using available labor and just materials from the earth that you can use that literally as a building material, as a building product. These are some more sort of examples of that. On the left-hand column is what's called Earthbag Construction. You use polypropylene bags that are like a quarter a piece. They don't rot. You fill them with earth and maybe 10% Portland cement. You set them and they set up like masonry. You can do, they're very good for like root cellars, underground shelters. You can do above ground shelters too with them, but that's just another example. Or highly compressed earth blocks. Rammed earth blocks is what you're seeing there on the right. Or even earthen floors. You know, you can use earth as a material. And then straw clay. Yeah, it's not you mix straw and clay together and as a binder, and you can build slip forms to where you can actually build walls out of that. You know, so many of these things that I'm going to show you are user-friendly in the sense that, you know, being super accurate and meticulous is not necessarily all that important. I mean, in terms of structure, it certainly isn't. And the sort of handcrafted quality that is given, you know, you don't necessarily have to a perfectly plain or flat wall. In fact, if it's got a little lumps and bumps, you know, it might actually give it more character and warmth than if not. So they're very user-friendly, particularly this day. If you or your family or your friends have labor to donate, that is a way that you can really reduce the cost of building new construction today. Some more examples. And using pole barn construction, where you go cut down trees that are on your property, you skin the bark off, and you can do a pole barn type of building. What you're also seeing here on the right are adobe walls. So there's, you know, it's a very sculptural medium, a very creative medium that you can use as well for with the earth. This is kind of a unique project. It's based on a prototype called Earth Ships, developed by architect Michael Reynolds out in Taos, New Mexico. Tire houses, literally built out of tires. I'm not personally an advocate of using tires. I think there are some technical problems with that, but this is a project that I inherited. and the former owner, it was rather a disaster for them, but I came on board and we kind of solved the technical problems of the tires, but actually ending up, I think, pretty much a state-of-the-art green building project. The top you can see the floor plan, the curved walls, the thick curved walls are actually tire walls, and it's earth bermed back into the ground. It's not underground per se, but it's bermed in, so you get all the advantages of that. And it looks like it belongs in New Mexico. It's actually here in Virginia, just south of Charlottesville. And you can see the very sort of nice sculptural qualities that you end up with there, and then also using native stone, which is another free building material that has essentially zero embodied energy, what they call embodied energy, so it's free for the taking. So there you can kind of see how that project finished out. Post and beam is another affordable resource, and I'm talking about perhaps using green lumber that comes straight from your local sawmills. There's both an art and a science to using that, so that it doesn't warp and twist and adversely check and create structural problems. But I've been using particularly green oak timber frame or post and beam construction for 3 decades now, without any failings whatsoever, and using green timber. So the price of that and the local availability of it. The issue of embodied energy, meaning the transportation and processing costs associated with a product is nil. It's a renewable resource. So post and beam, I think, can be a very affordable way to go. And I do distinguish that between what's called timber frame. The difference, timber frame being fancy mortise and tenon joints that do require additional labor and sometimes drives up the cost. So what I'm describing is more steel bracket bolted connections that almost anyone can do. Very, very simple process. So post and beam construction is another one. Here you're seeing some examples of that. And on the left there, what's called Waney siding. There again, you can get that from local mills. Sometimes it's scrap and it's burned, so it can be a nice effect if you're into that. And up the upper left, you can see an example of a bolted connection that can be very cost effective. Straw bale, that's another example of a locally available renewable resource. Very easy, obviously, to stack. It is somewhat labor intensive in that you do need to, typically you would hand plaster this with 3 coats of plaster, at least on the outside. On the inside, you've got some options. You could either plaster or light framing and drywall or a wood finish on the inside. So you got flexibility there. Straw bale and it's non-load bearing typically is what I would recommend. So you start with a post and beam structure that is freestanding, and then you add the straw bales. Very high R factor. The only Achilles tendon of straw bale construction is moisture. It needs to be procured dry, kept dry, and detailed so that it stays dry in all of your window and door detailing and all of that. So workmanship counts in order to make it work. Yes? Oh, okay. Next, please. This is another different straw bale project under construction, so you kind of get a sense of how that comes together. This actually won an award from the Virginia Sustainable Building Network in 2007 for the best residence in the state. It is what I would call a hybrid straw bale, and what I mean by that is it's not straw bale on all of the walls, really primarily just on the north. One of the downsides of straw bale is the thick wall, so that the net interior finished space can be substantially different than the perimeter space. So that's why sometimes I only use that as a super insulator where it's most beneficial, let's say on the north wall. And this is what is called a reciprocal frame roof. There are 8 primary members that go around. When they're all in place, they interlock. They create a free span structure, so you don't have any interior posts or bearing walls. And for construction efficiency, we built the that we built the roof down on the floor deck and then lifted the entire thing as a unit with a crane and set it on its posts. So that is how this one finished off. And of course, all that's exposed inside. It has a very wonderful, almost chapel-like feeling because of that spiral roof. This is a small house. She calls it her hut. It's really designed just for one person in this case, so it's kind of just open spaces in the middle. Here again, natural systems, using natural systems that take care of themselves. A lot of times it's just a matter of leaving it alone. And another example of a organic regenerative living system would be vegetated roof systems. And there are many different varieties of that. There's different ways to do it, but the way I like to do it is the whole system is only about 4 inches thick, so it really doesn't add a substantial weight. The planting medium is a type of it's a shale product that is heated, so it expands. It kind of puffs up, kind of like popcorn, so it's lightweight. And typically, I spec either succulents or sedums for the roof, so you don't need to get a lawnmower up there to maintain it, and it can stay very healthy pretty much year long. So what you're kind of seeing here is this particular one is a retrofit. Existing contemporary residence in Richmond, but it had a flat roof, tar and gravel roof that was wearing out, needed to be replaced. We did a value cost analysis and determined that of all the variations, all the possibilities, how to deal with this roof, really the most cost-effective way was to do a vegetated roof. So you're seeing kind of the sequence. Upper right-hand corner picture is the original roof, and you can see it was starting to grow mosses and stuff, so it wanted to be living anyway. So, you know, part of the idea is that you just kind of work with nature to do what it wants to do naturally anyway. So a little bit of light framing to take out all the kinks and the bumps in the roof, the leaf traps, the flashing problems, to make it one continuous flowing surface. And you see the membrane going down and the vegetated mix, and then the little plugs that you put in, the succulents and sedums, that in 6 months or a year will spread out to a continuous carpet. So vegetated roofs have, and I could give a whole talk just on vegetated roofs, but they have a lot of benefits in terms of reducing an urban heat island effect. They are inherently a cool roof because of the evaporation, the transpiration, the self-shading of the plant material. They're, of course, you're returning habitat for the birds and bees that a normal building footprint would take away. They're very quiet in terms of acoustics.
What is the expected age of the membrane?
Depending upon the membrane, yeah, in essence a lifetime, because it's on top of the substrate there's a membrane, then there's several other layers that are comprised of like a drainage layer, a root barrier. There's several things, so that one of the virtues is that the membrane itself, which is kind of the last line of defense, is very well protected from UV degradation, from the hot and cold cycles of freezing and thawing, from damage of falling limbs typically. So it's if you use a good quality membrane, and there are options there, but if you here again detailing counts just like it does with straw bale. But if you install it correctly, then in essence it should be a lifetime roof that you would never have to replace or maintain. Vegetated walls, there are different ways to do that too, but has some of the same attributes as vegetated roofs in terms of inherently cooling, and either you like that aesthetic or you don't. But there's a lot more being done with vegetated walls now, not only on the outside but also in interior spaces. There's a lot of work being done now of circulating air through living wall systems to purify the air and to enrich the interior environment with oxygen. These are some examples. This is not my work here. This is actually some photographs from the Solar Decathlon up in Washington, D.C. of some of the student work. But it just as some examples of how vegetated walls can be incorporated. The idea of recycling, reusing, refurbishing. This is an example of an existing farmhouse that was converted into a residence, and part of the issue there was, they wanted a big wraparound porch for shade and for outdoor living space, but yet we didn't want to cut off the light and the passive solar heat that we might be able to get. So this is an example of how you can do that with a low-pitched porch that goes out around, but then with these horizontal windows up above the porch, you can actually then get natural daylighting and passive solar heat gain coming into that same space. So you can kind of have your cake and eat it too in that way. Metal roofs, I'm a big, well, I guess I'll get into that more, but you know, I think they're a good thing if you have any inclinations to do any kind of rainwater catchment system. They're probably one of your best benefits there. This is a modern house which is pointing. It's kind of unusual shape, but it actually has a prow that points toward the north for deflecting the predominant cold winter winds. The backside, which is actually south, is sort of U-shaped, so it functions kind of like a solar catcher's mitt, and then it has big open interior spaces, and and so you can see the front and the back. It almost looks like two different houses, but in the backyard we did geothermal, which, depending upon your situation, can be a viable way to provide heated hot water for your house. You can either do that. This particular one has a network of pipes that are like buried 5 feet underground below frost that circulates back through a geothermal heat pump for heating and cooling the house. You can also do that by drilling wells if you have a small site or it's constricted. So geothermal, you know, you have to weigh that against other options. In most cases, I've found that hot water solar collector panels is probably a more affordable way to go than geothermal. So I would do that cross comparison, but that's another idea on that one. Okay, so that's earth. Air. Fresh air ventilation is really important. Here again, this doesn't cost more money. This is just sort of smart design. Just like, you know, passive solar, correct orientation, that does not cost more money. So accommodating passive cooling techniques and natural daylighting does not cost more money. It's just good design. What you kind of see here in this picture, particularly upper right-hand corner, and this is a principle that I try to incorporate in some way in every project that I do, which is a vertical space. It can be like an atrium space. It can be a stairwell. There's a lot of different ways to kind of do it architecturally, but the idea is to create a vertical space so that you can get what's called a chimney effect or a stack effect, where you can introduce cool air on a lower level and allow it to rise and exhaust high out somewhere else. And the upper corner, I think, is a good illustration, because what you're really seeing there is an operable skylight coupled with a ceiling fan, so that in terms of supplementing this chimney effect, the skylight's open, the fan helps to pull that air up and out and exhaust it. Conversely, in the wintertime, the fan is reversible, so when heat would typically normally rise and stratify, you can then blow it back down. And we're doing all this with you know, a very simple electric motor, which takes very minimal electric power, and so it's a very, very efficient way of doing that. And we're doing it without ducting. And ducting, I think, is here again, I only incorporate that in about maybe 1 out of 10 projects that I do, forced air systems that require ducting. Because in terms of indoor air quality, ducting is typically it builds up dust, mold, mildew that you can't access, you can't clean it. Legionnaire's disease was a result of ducting. They're unsightly, you've got to box them in, and so they're more costly. So if there's ways to minimize or eliminate ducting in your projects, then that's going to be your advantage. And so the ways that I do that is, first of all, for heating. Almost every project I do, I'll get more into that, but has radiant floor heating, evenly distributed heat, so you don't need to be blowing hot air around. For cooling, there's a whole series of things you can do: shading devices, ceiling fans, this chimney effect we just talked about, sometimes water elements. There's a lot you can do, and then even if if you must have that super cold in your bedroom, for example, for sleeping or whatever it is, there's what's called ductless split systems or mini split systems. I don't have enough time to go into that in detail, but basically it is a way to deliver either cold air or dehumidify or actually even supplemental heat to your spaces, to your house without ducting. This is an example of how the chimney effect works. Pretty much self-explanatory. Keep rolling. This is another project that I did. In this case, it actually had a tower element, a third-story tower element, which certainly supplemented the whole stack effect, chimney effect thing, and then also provided an optimum place to hang out for all the views that were on this site. So another example of that. Just more examples of, in this case it was a 2-story, but we held back the second floor mezzanine from the front south wall to get that same circulation thing happening there. Another example of it, and also example of green oak timber frame construction there. Sun and shade control is really important. What you're seeing here are illustrations of noon sun, the top at winter, the middle the solstices, and the bottom, or rather the equinoxes, and the bottom is the winter, or summer, summer. Top winter, bottom summer. So it's all passive. It's just a matter of correctly proportioning eaves and overhangs primarily, so that in the summertime, when you want all your south glass to be in shade, it is in shade, and conversely, in the winter, when you want the sun to come in, it floods into the house, and that's just a matter of good design. It doesn't cost any more money. So many different materials to choose from. This particular one is what's called Faswall, F-A-S-W-A-L-L, upper left corner. It's a block that is a mix of cement and wood chips. They're lightweight. You dry stack them without mortar. When you're up about 4 feet, and you lay steel in them. When you're up about 4 feet, you pour the cores, so you end up with a steel reinforced mesh, structural mesh inside. Because it's a composition of cement and wood chips, you can plaster it. You can screw into it. It's from a recycled. Actually, the wood chips are from old ground up oak pallets. So it's, in terms of owner-builder user friendliness, it's another really good system. It can be very cost effective. For the sake of time, I'm not going into a lot more detail on that. Of course, wind energy in terms of the air element kind of speaks for itself. Fire, another element. Of course, that's grounded in all of us. The campfire, the hearth, warmth in its most basic and primeval level is really important, of course, and its more contemporary applications. And this is an example of, actually this is my own house that I built up in Maine, northern Maine coast, with severe winters, but big wraparound greenhouse on the south side that even in the winter times, a lot of times you get beautiful sunny days. So even if the air temperature outside is frigid, you can still trap a tremendous amount of solar heat and use it not only for heating but also for extending the growing season for all your plants and your gardening. This is another example. This is a small little cabin. What's unique about this one is the site was almost inaccessible. Couldn't get a cement truck to it, delivery truck, strewn with large granite boulders. So we actually took advantage of one of these big boulders and built the house so that part of the boulder was exposed inside the house, and worked out the sun angles so that what happens is that in the winter time the sun is low, and so it shines in these upper clear story windows, strikes the boulder, which is exposed inside the house, warms that boulder. It becomes the heating mass that helps heat the building in the winter time. In the summer, there again, your overhangs are proportioned, so all that south glass is in shade, the boulder's in shade. It's a cooling mass that helps cool it in the summer. No mechanical systems, nothing, doesn't cost more money. And we also used it as part of the foundation, so we saved the cost of that cement and concrete. So just you know, you can apply these things to very, very low-tech, very simple, small buildings, or scale them all the way up to something large, and they still apply. Just kind of more examples. The U shape is really nice because facing south, because what happens then is that at one time of day or another, every room in that house gets direct solar light at one time of day or another. So that's another principle. Photovoltaics and solar hot water, two different animals. Solar hot water, I would say, is affordable for almost every project you might consider, at least for your domestic hot water and perhaps even for supplementary heating. Photovoltaics are still a bit pricey, so you know, you really got to consider why you would want photovoltaics, what all of your motivations are. If cost is the only one, you might really want to consider that until prices hopefully will drop at some point. But you know, there are a lot of other reasons for considering that too, particularly if you're in a remote location where you know the cost of bringing in the grid power is just cost prohibitive. And then you have a battery system. Most of the projects that I do have some that are off the grid, but most of them are what are called grid tied, so you can eliminate the panels. Here you see the radiant floor slab going in. It's tied in. Integrated systems. I'm running out of time, so I got to just keep rolling. The different types of hot water collector panels, flat panels. These are evacuated tube collectors. This is a photovoltaic array powering one of my houses. This one, actually, that you saw earlier. Water element, rainwater catchment. So many parts of the country right now have, you know, drought conditions, and even in Virginia, you might, you know, where typically that's not an issue, you might want to have additional water for irrigating, whatever. This is what's called a butterfly roof that funnels the water that comes off the roof into an ornamental pool that overflows then into underground catchment system. So the integration of landscape and architecture is really important. This actually won an award in 2010. Rather unusual geometry, very modern, but there's a method to the madness. The roof angles are such that here again, in the summertime, the glass is in shade. In the winter, you let it through. The back angle is kicked up, optimum for for active solar collector panels. There's a butterfly roof for rainwater catchment. The flat roofs are all vegetated, accessible roof panels. You can see that it's a timber frame roof, rainwater catchment, hydronic radiant floor heating. Indoor ecosystems with water. There again, you can incorporate living systems into the interior. This is actually a project, that Earthship project I showed you earlier, actually incorporated an indoor waterfall and a biofilter for supporting plant life and aquatic life and fishes so that you didn't have to have chemicals, and actually worked as, believe it or not, a passive cooling system. There are alternative ways of gray water treatment and even black water sometimes, where you can incorporate hydroponics or aquaculture, constructed wetlands. This is a dam that I built a number of years ago for water power, which is hard to get regulated these days, but at that time it was a viable way to go. This is a water power mill that is kind of my roots up in Maine. Okay, and then lastly, because we got just a couple of minutes, is Spirit. And I just wanted to talk about that a little bit because these are actually design projects but not yet built. So in that sense, they're kind of in the spirit. This one is, it's not underground, it's not earth shelter, but it does have a continuous vegetated roof that you can walk up on. The design utilizes a steel grain storage silo as an attached guest cottage. We lined the inside of the straw bale, or of the steel silo, with straw bales, so it's very soft, cushy, warm inside. Very, very cost-effective way to go in terms of volume of square footage that you can encompass for the cost involved. Yet another project that rather than being rectilinear in plan, it uses a series of hexagons. This is a Tree of Life spa in Warm Springs, Virginia, where it's a modular system, a kit of parts, so it's not as complex as it might look. because every wedge shape is the same all the way around. You can walk continuously on grade all the way up to the top, to the overlook. Tree of Life spot has a center atrium space that's large enough for a full-grown tree in the inside, so you get that air purification thing happening, the chimney effect. Really everything that I've just kind of been talking about already. Handicap accessible on both floors. And then this project, which is a recording studio actually for a saxophone player of Dave Matthews Band, and using kind of the terraced garden concept, Babylon kind of concept for that. More theoretical, hopefully get built. And so there's that project. And to finish up, the bottom line though is all of this really kind of revolves around people too. We can't forget about people and the way that our environments that we are creating create opportunity for people and for community and for interaction, which can be detrimental or it can be healthy, however you want to put it together. So we can't forget about the healing element. And hopefully by incorporating some of these things, we can collectively make this a better world for us all. Thank you. Questions? Discussion? Okay.
You live up in Virginia now?
Yeah, my home and office is about a half an hour south of Charlottesville and near Schuyler, Virginia, the Walton's Mountain. But I literally go all over everywhere for projects. And in fact, the sort of the last one I showed you there is in South Boston. So I do.
Mainly Virginia, though?
Mainly, but I go out of state, and I actually had a couple out of the country. So I go anywhere where the project takes me.
In your houses where you're using you said you use a lot of radiant floor.
Yes.
Is that in slab, or do you do some under hardwood or laminate?
Both, but I found that it's most economical to do it in a floor slab because you're getting the benefit of the thermal mass there,
Right.
and also in terms of cost, you got to do the slab anyway, so it's just the additional cost of the tubing. It's
But if you have a multi-level home,
in some cases, depending on the design, and if you only had one heating zone, small house, you can get by with it just in the slab because the heat's going to rise, and you can take that advantage. If you do need to have it in a wood frame floor, there's a number of ways to do that. I think some are better than others. The one that I actually like the best is probably where you attach the tubing right to the subfloor and then gypcrete because that gives you the thermal mass, which the other ones really don't give you as much. But there's pros and cons to. There's different ways to do it in a wood frame.
You stay with the project from start to finish, or you just design it and you have to find a builder that can do it?
My background is design and building, but currently I just do design and project management. So I do work with my clients during the process of construction and making recommendations on contractors and all of that, and doing on-site periodic supervising, inspecting.
How hard is it to find contractors who can do all this cool stuff? I'm imagining that's the challenge, is finding a builder who can handle this.
It is. That varies. Sometimes it's a bit of an educational process. In other cases, though, like the one in South Boston with the really radical roof, the way we were able to deal with that is I have a firm in Powhatan who I've been working with on a number of projects a number of years. They manufactured the components for the roof as a kit, and then they brought it to the site and helped erect it and work with the local contractor. So that's kind of a way of bridging that issue between it's just unfamiliarity with local builders on doing stuff. And I've done that in several cases. It's worked out very successfully. So you have the local builder do what they are familiar with and what they can do, where their experience ends, then we bring in a ringer to kind of work with them to get it done.
We're so rural. I'm thinking of doing a green roof on the Peace Pentagon. Would you have to bring people in to handle over a system
No,
like that?
no. If you had me to supervise it.
There's a contractors operating in western Grayson County that have a self-contained trailer. They just pull in.
Okay.
One truck pulls in the work trailer and another one pulls in the living quarters. So
Yeah.
they don't go home but on.
Yeah, more and more firms are getting into that because they realize it's a niche market, and
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You said you're using radiant hydronic in all these projects. Have you come across anything where you use electric?
Yeah, on a small scale, maybe for a bathroom or something like that, there are little radiant panels that you can use. In general, it's probably not efficient. It's like anything with a heating element, a toaster, electric hot water heater, anything with a heating element is not going to be efficient, particularly if you want to consider generating your own power. You're much better off heating water with solar.
Fred does have a table if you have further questions. We have the time crunch now. It's time for the door prize drawing.